I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank Mr. LaFavors and Boyle County School System and the University of Cumberland for supporting this effort. I want to introduce a few people that are in the room today. David Young, Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum. Chris Holdeman, Assistant Superintendent in charge of operations. And the Superintendent of Schools, Boyle County Schools, Michael Favors. Thank you very much. My program and what I actually went to look at in this study was school funding in the state of Kentucky. It's the case for a recallable nickel. One of the things we look at is funding and how we can best use our resources to help students. Introduction. The purpose of the study is to show how nickel funding does affect schools and how the Kentucky funding mechanism compares nationwide. It's basically an overall study to show exactly what funding can do for the school, how it can change the face of your school, and be a huge, huge asset in its effect for children. My review of literature details the effects of resources on school districts in Kentucky and nationwide. Literature also details the Kentucky system of resource allocation, which we'll go over a little bit more in depth during this study. My review of literature, basically I'm looking at a holistic approach from nationwide all the way down to the Kentucky system of funding. My first review is Paying for Public Education, How and Why Money Matters. There are a lot of initial studies, or several initial studies, that did not show a direct correlation between funding and academic achievement. This is one of many studies that shows a direct correlation between academics and resource allocation. I think that as you go, a lot of the resources are now, or a lot of the studies are now showing that there is a direct effect on how students succeed with additional resources. The next is the effect of school resources on school achievement. One of the things that we look at is how to better attract and retain our promising teachers. More resource allocation allows us to have a better pay scale, which does have a direct impact on teachers. It also has a direct impact on our educational system and teacher retention just because of happiness in their job, ability to perform their job with adequate resources. Is school funding fair? A national report card. This study actually details how schools in impoverished areas do receive fewer resources. We'll go over some of the funding mechanisms later and show exactly how that comes to fruition. There are a lot of attempts to equalize funding throughout the United States, but this study shows how there is a direct correlation between impoverished areas and resource allocation in the United States. And one of the things that we'll talk about that is fundamental to the SEEK program is how they try to level the playing field with different aspects of school funding. There are some specific aspects in SEEK that we'll look at that may lend itself to some inequality. Where's the money gone? Changes in levels of composition of educational funding. This is a 9-district study. This educational study does delineate how educational funding has affected school districts through curriculum, facilities, staffing. In particular, we'll look at cuts in SEEK funding and how that's impacted schools in the state of Kentucky. Most states have cut school funding and some continue cutting. We are just now in the state of Kentucky getting back to pre-recessionary funding in SEEK. Before SEEK funding, before we started increasing SEEK funding in the last couple of years, we had seen steady decreases in SEEK funding, and now we're only initially getting back to those stages in which we received full SEEK funding in the mid-2000s. That has had a big impact on the state of Kentucky. We see that through grants, we see that through state grants, federal grants, we also see that in the form of the SEEK actual formula. A research synthesis, unequal school funding in the United States. This shows how many cases school funding is unequal and how poorly allocated school districts do suffer. They suffer academically, they suffer in climate, they suffer in a lot of different ways. We also see that students in those situations don't receive a lot of the same opportunities as students that resource allocation is done effectively. This is a 50-state survey on state school finance. Very interesting to see how Kentucky compares nationally to other states in the United States as far as how we fund schools. The next slide shows funding systems for the schools. You have the foundational program. Foundational program is what most states in the United States use. 37 states use this. It's a uniform state guarantee per pupil with state and local district funding. It's basically, for example, in the state of Tennessee, they use a basic educational allotment in which the state of Tennessee gives a base foundational funding for all students. They do it based on number of teachers, number of students, but they do it on enrollment. So that shows that that's a basic foundational component, and then they can enhance locally with local dollars their educational funding, but they get a base foundational program. District Power Equalization System. This is a very unique system. Only 2 states in the United States use it. It provides funding that varies based on tax rates. They look at your actual tax rates, and that's how they fund you in these 2 states. We're looking at Vermont and Wisconsin in those cases. They actually take their tax rates, and they promise to, for example, in Wisconsin, they promise to fund you at 2/3 of all funding will come from state funding. The rest comes from local funding based on your tax rates. So if you actually receive tax increases, you receive less in state funding. Doesn't mean that you're going to get more money. It just means if your tax rates go down or if you receive less revenue, they increase it, but it doesn't mean you're going to receive more money. They just give you the same amount. Full state funding. All funding is collected and distributed by the state. This only happens in one state, and that's Hawaii. Hawaii is the only one where all of the money is collected and distributed by the state. There is no local amount. Flat grants provides a uniform amount per pupil from state funds. Localities can add funding to this amount. Again, only one state, North Carolina, uses flat grants. Flat grants is a uniform amount. Basically, localities can add additional funding, but they do it all on one flat amount in North Carolina. Combination tiered system. There's 9 of those states, and these combine several funding plans, and that's what the state of Kentucky does. The next slide will show you all of the states and exactly what type of system they use, whether it be foundational, full state, flat grant, district power, or combination or tiered system. The next slide, we're talking about Kentucky's combination of foundational program and district power. That means that we do have a component that is a foundational program, and that's our SEEK program. But we also have the ability to increase taxes locally each year. We can increase up to 4% each year. Districts also have the option of passing the nickel tax, specifically for construction. And that's a large impetus in what we're talking about today is the nickel tax and how that can really affect the quality in the state of Kentucky. The nickel has traditionally been equalized, which infuses the district with more money. Many communities feel as if they're not able to pass the nickel, though, creating inequity. So if you're in a district that has trouble passing the nickel, because of the equalization, that may create some inequity in the state of Kentucky because obviously there's more money infused if you get equalization. That's state money coming directly to you through the form of a nickel. In the past, urgent need money through the legislature has been used as a local component to establish districts that are eligible through the Parsons Report. That means that basically if you didn't have the nickel, you were ineligible to receive urgent need funding in the past, I think, 3 sessions of the Kentucky legislature. And that is all dependent on the Parsons Report. The Parsons Report being schools that are in most need. A qualifying factor is the nickel. You had to have a nickel in order to be a qualifier. And that has been a major source of revenue for schools that needed to be replaced. The next is the impact of classroom design on pupils' learning. We talk a lot about, well, what does having nicer facilities actually mean to us in the state of Kentucky? Well, the Salford study out of Harvard shows there's a 16% impact on school design upon pupil learning rates. They used over 5,000 students. They looked at the environment in which they were in, and they looked at their learning rates. And they do see a 16% impact on how the school is designed, whether it be through layout or environmental factors that truly affect how students learn. Some basic design elements that affect student learning were temperature, air quality. Those are the more physical components, but you also have flexibility and complexity, which they really denoted as key in learning environment. That what is the flexibility of the learning environment, and what is the complexity of the learning environment? So those have been 2 big things as well. The next one is my research question. The question is, can the levy of a nickel enable districts to increase salaries and advance curricular change as a result of fewer general fund dollars being allocated to construction? Also, how does Kentucky compare with funding systems across the United States in that ability to do that? When we look at it, our data sources and collection, we use the SEEK forecast and SEEK allocation, financial data from our Munis Financial Program, Property Valuation Administration, and we'll talk a little bit about how that plays in a second, and our bonding analysis. Our collection is from Kentucky Department of Ed, Will County Schools Financial Management Program, and Civic Financial Advisors, who's our bonding agent. What are the techniques? We review data from the SEEK forecast and SEEK allocation, review the amount of money spent on construction out of general fund, and we also review funding with and without the recallable nickel. interesting, when we started this program, I had to pick my capstone project before we actually got into the nickel. So I was really dependent on seeing how this nickel played out to make sure that it does have an impact on students. And we'll take a look at exactly how it's impacted students, but in the early stages, we were just in the process of starting the nickel. At the time, we had a fiscal year 2015 bonding potential of 0. We went to, if without the nickel, we would have had 2016 bonding potential of $600,000. Our projected bonding potential at that time was $3 million. The next slide will show our data analysis on what we've done. Since 2001, most of our bonding potential has been used on renovations. We did a BCHS renovation from 2005 to 2010, and we did a middle school renovation from 2014 and 15. We used $6.5 million on the high school and $5.3 on the middle school, which shows you that ate up almost all of our bonding potential. What is a nickel? A nickel's 5 cents on every $100 of property. Property valuation of $100,000 will cost approximately $50 every year. We always put that contingent on 100% collection rate. It's always a little bit higher because your collection rate's never 100, so it's always a little bit higher than $50 per year. How's it calculated? This is an example from KDE. This is the example they give you. How a nickel's calculated in equalization, because everybody always thinks that equal means exactly equal. To put it in the simplest terms, and this is a complicated formula, but it's a 5 cent on every $100 assessment. This is an example. They use a really low example of threshold, $628,000. So our local nickel revenue here is $314,212. That's how much is generated locally. So then you have to figure out what is your total for your nickel. You take 5 cents, and this is where it becomes a little complicated. You take the higher state equalization level or per pupil assessment. State equalization level in this example is $725,000. That's now increased to $749,000. But our per pupil assessment, that means out of all assessment and all our pupils, what's the average is $463,000. So we take the higher, which is $725,000. So total nickel per pupil revenue is this is per pupil, is $362.50. That is their AADA versus growth. That is their attendance with enrollment. That gives you your total nickel of $854,000. You subtract that from what you have locally, and that gives you your state equalization. So that tells you that it's not exactly equal. Although this district created $314,000, their equalization was $540,000 because of their total nickel. So the next slide tells you ours. We're over $1 billion in assessment, so ours is going to be drastically different. But if you take a look at our AADA versus growth, these are just data numbers. $749,000 is the state per pupil assessment, and so our per pupil assessment is $463,375. You take that total number of pupils, just divided by that total assessment, that gives you total per pupil. FSPK levy, 5 cents. That's the nickel. So you take the higher state equalization number, $749,000, higher than $463,000. Total FSPK revenue, ours is $374.50 a student. AADA plus growth, $24.08. That's our AADA. That's our average daily attendance. Total FSPK, $901,798. Okay, so we take our locally. What do we get? We get 5 cents multiplied times the over $1 billion. We get $557,905. You subtract that from your total, and that gives you your state equalization of $343,893. So it tells you it's not exactly the same, but that's the entire process of how they come up with state equalization, where you get the different numbers.
So maybe real quick on equalization, I think something people think about as well is that, we passed the nickel July of 15, and so far we've gotten 25% equalized.
Yes.
So I think people a lot of times assume, you pass that nickel and you're going to get that $343,893. Right. To date, we've gotten 25% of that.
Right. So traditionally what the legislature has done is usually for nickels that have just been issued, they will equalize you at 25%, which for us is $93,000. So we saw $93,000. We fully hope and maybe expect that we'll get 100% equalization at some point in the future, which gives us $343,000 a year.
Now, one other thing for folks to think about is $93,000 does not sound like a lot of money, but you know, typically when they say when you're thinking about a bond, you multiply by 13.
Right.
So if you were to bond that, it's actually worth significantly more. The 343 times 13 would generate, I don't know what that is, $5 million.
Yes.
So, and another great thing about it is, although we haven't gotten full equalization, every year that $93,000, we're able to have that, you know, capture that and hold that for a future project. We're getting ready to build a middle school, so every year before we sell that bond, that money is sitting in an account essentially.
Right.
That when we build the middle school, we'll be able to make a cash,
right.
You know, play into. So, like, how much money has that nickel already generated for us that will be a cash offer in the project?
That's right. And what we've done in our project.
How much is it so far?
1.3 million.
So it doesn't sound like it sounds like a little bit of money, but we're already at 1.3 million, and we just passed the nickel in July of 2015.
Correct.
We sell a bond. If we sell the bond in May, we'll have 1.3 million.
Yes.
If we sell that bond later in the fall,
yeah,
what would it be then?
Almost 2 million.
Almost
Just local. That's not including the equalization.
So it's really, I mean, it's more significant than it even appears.
Yes, it is. So how does it work? Local revenue, you generate 5 cents on property for every $100. Money collected can only be used for facility construction and debt associated with construction. But we're going to show how that affects curriculum, how that affects facilities, staffing, all of those things. And we've talked a long time, and I know Mr. LaFavors had pointed out, the difference between single nickel districts and how they have to use general fund money for construction instead of other purposes. The money collected can be bonded, and to Mr. LaFavor's point, we anticipated raising about $558,000, which we seen that come to fruition, which would result in basically around $7.2 million in bonding potential just from local revenue. State revenue generated by the nickel. Traditionally, we did talk about it. The legislature does equalize the nickel. State equalization at 100% would be $343,893. That would, when bonded, state equalization would increase our bonding potential by $4.5 million. The nickel tax with state equalization will increase bonding potential in Boyle County schools by $11.7 million. And you got to remember, in 2015, we were at zero. We had zero bonding potential, and the next year we were going to have $600,000. General fund construction projects. This is the big impetus behind this study. We wanted to see what is the effect once we can eliminate general fund construction from our budget. What does that free us up to do? On average, Boyle County, we spend $250,000 from general fund for construction projects. What are those? We do maintenance and upgrading and heating. We just put in a new road. We've done roof issues, athletic facilities, small buildings, technology and electrical upgrades. Things that would normally be considered inside of a bond, we're doing with general fund money. So how did this play out? So when we first started the project and we took it to the community, we took it to the board, we did community forums, we took a lot of different avenues to show exactly what we were doing and exactly what we were trying to accomplish in Boyle County schools. We took a look at the nickel and the compensating rate. We told our community, we told our board, that rate was going to be 71.4 in 2015-16 with the nickel. We basically were in a situation in which we had to, because of the amount of money we spend out of general fund for construction, we had to pass a 4% every year. We were 65.9 as our rate. That went to 68.2 with a 4%. If we would have done a 4%, the next year, if we would have done another 4%, we would have went to 70.6. At the time, we showed our community and our board that we projected with modest increased property valuation that we would go to 71.1. In actuality, we received a higher property assessment than we thought we would, and our rate effectively went to 70.4. It worked out better than we thought it would. By going to 71.4, we actually went to a rate that was less than what we told people that they would be if we did 4% for 2 consecutive years by going compensating. So I think that was a key for us and our community and what we promised them. We were conservative in that number, and it come out even better than what we thought we would get.
Well, I'll make a comment on that real quick. Is just that, you know, of course we can't from our office, we can't say how the board will vote. We can only say what we will recommend.
Yes.
And what we said to the community was, with the nickel tax, which the graph at the top there is showing you nickel and compensating rate. With the nickel tax, if the community allows that to pass, we would be in a position to come back with compensating rates in August of 15 and August of 16 as a recommendation from our office. We don't know how the board would vote. And the community went with us on that. There was a petition started. They couldn't get the votes in large part because they knew there was a chance. I think, well, first off, I think there's a commitment to education in our community. But then the second thing was they believed that we would make that recommendation, and we did. In August of 2015, we recommended a compensating rate. We did again in August of 2016. And as David says, the actual rate now here is 70.4. Had we not had the nickel, we would have come back with 2.4%, just as we had done for over a decade, every year for over a decade. And their rate would have actually been higher. So the nickel actually brought their rate down because, as David said, we're not needing the general fund money to do construction projects as much as we were before, because we've literally doubled our bonding capacity in the district.
That's right. And another thing, we talked a little bit about the Parsons report and the ability to be eligible for urgent need money. And we became eligible with the when we passed the nickel, and we received 25% equalization in the first year, which we talked about as $93,000. But what that also enabled us to gain was a $12.585 million urgent need offer of assistance due to having a recallable nickel was a large part of that. The state legislature wants to see that there is some local funding in that. We did show that we were trying to upgrade our facilities, and we did receive an urgent need offer of assistance of $12.585 million. Next slide will show you what are our results. We are now in the process of looking at a new $30 million middle school. None of that would have been possible without the recallable nickel. We would have been at a $600,000-$700,000 in bonding potential. Today we sit at around $29 to $30 million in bonding potential. A new middle school with a performing arts center is what we're currently looking at. What else does it do? Curricularly, one-to-one technology for all students in 4th through 12th grade. We were able to do that with a cash basis. We did not have to do any leases for that technology. Less general fund money going to construction needs. We've also been able to do non-mandated state pay raises for our staff. We all know that we've had some mandated state pay raises in the last couple of years, but we are currently looking at another pay raise just because of being able to have those resource allocations. And we talked earlier about the study showing teacher retention. It does have an effect in districts that do effective resource allocation and have higher salaries.
Well, David, let's talk about that for a second. Let's say something happens for new teachers with KTRS, where now it's a 401k plan for everybody new. What will our district need to do? As you're saying, the pay matters, the retirement system matters.
Yes.
What would you say your recommendation would be as the finance director should something happen with KTRS?
Well, anytime that you're looking at something happening in KTRS, you're talking about the retirement system for everybody in the state. So one of the things that we're looking at is, and there are some specific things that can be done as far as pay, but you're raising your effective salary rate to one of the highest in the area. That's going to give you increased retention. It's also, we talked about our building is going to be huge. But also one of the things that you could look at is a potential 401k match. You can't do that without extra funding. So if you look at a 401k match, in which a couple districts do a little bit of that in lieu of a salary increase, because it is a little bit cheaper than a full-on salary increase. But that is something that we could look at in helping those teachers that are now in a 401k. We could look at a match that would help supplement their salary, and that would help us greatly in teacher retention, because we'd be one of the few districts able to do that if necessary.
So I agree with you on that. So if something were to happen like that and you need to go 401k match, how important is the nickel in allowing any district across Kentucky to consider that option?
Well, it's critical, because then you're not spending the money out of general fund for any kind of construction needs. That money's going to come out of your general fund. So if you're always making a decision on what you're going to do, one of the decisions we made was to go one-to-one with technology, and we're able to do that. And I think the very next bullet exemplifies how we're going to be able to do that if necessary, and that is increasing the general fund by $5 million over 6 years. And we're talking about doing that while going one-to-one with technology, while giving non-state mandated pay raises, while doing all the things we've been able to do. And then the one area that we've looked at, and we try to exhaust all avenues when we look at any kind of solution, is what are we going to do about our construction needs? We've actually pointed out that we may have had even school closures because of construction needs. The nickel allows us to get our construction where our academics are. So one of the things that we look at is how do you do that in a standalone environment and not have to use general fund cash? And that's what it's enabled us to do, is increase our funding amounts and increase how much money we add to our contingency over the last 6 years by $5 million. And a big part of that in the amount of outlay we've done in the last 2 years is the nickel, because we have not had to go in to the general fund this past year to do a lot of construction. We're not going to have to go using the general fund to build a new school, something that would not even have been possible, or even we didn't even think about this 4 years ago. The new school came to fruition in the last 3 years. It all came to fruition with really the nickel. That's when we first started thinking about it. Put a lot of work into it with Chris doing the new district facility plan, going through that process. Getting the nickel, getting the equalization, getting the urgent need money has all enabled us to put ourselves in a position to more effectively give our resources to our children instead of construction needs. What's the recommendation? You can drastically change the face of your school system by levying the recallable nickel. We're going to see that. We're going to see that. You can't see it in the video, but we're looking at a new $30 million facility. We're in now schematic design with it. Maybe we can see it.
Yeah, we're kind of proud of this. There, people can check it out.
Okay. So that's the schematic design of our new middle school, and something we will be very proud of. Something that's going to give our children, and we talked about it earlier, opportunity. What's opportunity? Performing Arts Center is a tremendous opportunity that our students did not have in the past. It's given them also collaborative areas, things that we see here through design with all of our design staff that's really looked at it, through our high impact team, through children in our district that have made suggestions and have brought this to life. So we're seeing a change in the face of education through facility design enabled by the nickel, and then more resources to our children through not having to use general fund money. So our recommendation is that we be able to do the nickel because it's a huge impact for your school district, and we've seen that come to life. Since I started this project, we did not have the nickel yet, and seeing what we have today is night and day from what we had 3 years ago. Greatest result, all 5 school districts in Boyle County are distinguished. One of the things you can be most proud of, and that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about just opportunity inside the curriculum. We're talking about opportunity for those children when they leave our school system. What is their opportunity? And we have 5 distinguished high schools. Thanks to our academic success, thanks to what we're doing now currently in our district, it's made a huge impact for our children, and that's, I think, what we can be most proud of. Have any questions? And that's my those are my sources, and where I got some of my information from our national and state studies. Give you kind of a little background on that.
I have a question.
Okay.
Is Kentucky's form of funding for students, in your mind, the best or one of the most popular? I know you listed several different states there, but in your opinion,
right,
which is the best way to fund students?
I think we have a funding system in which schools get funded, through a foundational program. We have a system that does give us a foundational program. I am in favor of a foundational program. I think that every district needs to have a foundational program in which they get funding, not based on tax rate. But at the same time, we do look at there are communities that have trouble passing a nickel. And the nickel has enabled us to do things that are phenomenal. And those efforts would be truly appreciated in all districts across Kentucky. But we know that it's a highly political issue right now. The nickel is being opposed, people are for it, people are against it. But what it does is it gives access, it gives opportunity. So I do love that about it. At the same time, I do realize that there are districts that have trouble passing that nickel and gaining that opportunity through inequality.
Right, and well, and I realized as the facilities director just how critical it was, just like you all did. But I'm just wondering, had we not been able to do that, and our community voted on that, we would be really in a situation with our facilities in trouble.
Oh, we would have a lot of things that we would be considering that now we will probably not consider. We have a lot of things that we're able to now do, and I think a lot of districts and a lot of it that really helped us, and I truly believe that is truly being upfront with the community. We came out, we told the community what we were doing, we told them why we were doing it, we told them what the impact would be, and how it would help their community. And I think that was a big part of it, is the communication factor and being able to get that information to people in the community. And we actually saw a lot of support. We saw support at our board meetings. We saw support at our community forums. We saw things that, and we really did not have an active, a huge voice against it as compared to the people that were for it, because they knew what it would do for our students, our kids, and our community.
David, I'm interested in the equalization, the figures that you showed a minute ago. So I knew our situation, which was that the equalization was less than what we locally generated. We generated 500 and something thousand, but the equalization was like 343.
Right.
But in the example you showed, the state equalization in that situation was more. So did I saw that correctly?
Yes, that's correct.
So
And
equalization could be more or less than what's locally generated.
Absolutely. And when you look at districts that don't have as high property valuation, that's one of the things you're looking at. We have communities in which they levy a nickel, and their local component is less than what the state component is after they do the total nickel.
Right.
So yeah, that is possible. That's where the misnomer of 100% equalization, and people thinking that it's the exact amount. It's not. It's equalized based on a power formula with your taxing district. So yeah, that's absolutely possible. And we see that. We see that in the building fund nickel. It's opposite, depending on property valuation, a lot of different factors there. You also see that property valuation has effect on districts. There's districts in Kentucky that receive almost no seed funding. We have districts in Kentucky that have a $1.3 million property assessment per student. The state funding equalization level is $749,000, makes them ineligible for Tier 1 funding. There's districts that get maybe $500,000 in seed funding for the entire year. So they try to distribute that money based on, it's a power formula on what your tax rates look like and what it looks like in your community. Again, I want to thank Boyle County Schools, thank the University of Cumberland, thank everyone in this room, and everyone with Boyle County for the tremendous amount of work that was done. This was a presentation, but it's probably meant a lot more to us than any presentation has because of what it does for our children. And I think we will see that, and we're excited about it. A new school in the next in 2019, new opportunities for our students, and a great opportunity ahead. Thank you.